This is Words Aptly Spoken, which comes from Proverbs 25:11. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. The written word is a precious treasure. We want to preserve written knowledge for God's glory and as an anchor to the history of the church and its classical conversations. We hope to encourage the reading of words and of the word. All right, so welcome to Words Aptly Spoken, where Jennifer, Courtney, Tim Knotts, and I discuss a book each week from the Classical Conversations curated curriculum. Today's Wednesday, October 25th, 2023. I'm Lee Bortons, and we're also going to be joined today by CCMM curriculum developer, Brittany Lewis. Jennifer, tell us about this month's show.
Well, I can't believe we're at the end of the month, but this series that we have done this month, if you want to find them in our archives, and we've been talking about poetry. And today we're making a little bit of a transition, but we'll hopefully connect it for you during our conversation. We're going to make a little transition from verbal arts into the visual arts. So today's a little bit different than our past episodes on the Brightest Heaven of Invention, which is about Shakespeare. We're on the other side, which is about different poetic forms, and Invitation to the Psalms, which is looking at Psalms through the lens of poetic forms.
So what are we going to talk about today?
So today we're going to talk about art. We're going to talk about the book that is in the CCMM curriculum called Marvelous to Behold. So
that's great. And you can get any of those past episodes that Jennifer just mentioned on my YouTube channel at Lee Bortons. And you can also visit my website, leebortons.com, for links to the past shows and even upcoming shows. All right, so team, let's get started. It's good to see you here, Brittany and Tim.
Yeah, welcome everybody.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right. So, you know what I'm going to ask you, Lee, because it's always the same question. But why is this book Marvelous to Behold in the Classical Conversations curriculum?
Yeah, so we're a classical organization, and from the very youngest of our students, memorizing the timeline cards that have beautiful art on them, as well as the opportunities they have for 6 weeks each year to work on oils, where they're learning to actually draw. And then they work on great artists and great composers, as well as learning tin whistle. So we've got all this art in the curriculum for the younger children. And we wanted to be sure to include that for our older students. One is a reminder and more of a solidifier of ideas and those pegs. When the students have gotten older, as well as to make sure children that maybe didn't go through foundations get to also have an opportunity to discuss art history and to really enjoy art. So this book goes along really well with our coursework in Challenge 2, but it's such a beautiful book that you and Jennifer and Courtney Sanford put together. I just really recommend people buy it and use it for art history in general, and just enjoy how beautiful the art is that's in the curriculum.
Yeah, one of our goals was to make really large, really great reproductions of the art so that people could look at it and discuss it together. So there is great beauty in that. So as I gave away in the opening, we've been talking about poetry, and now we're talking about Marvelous to Behold and the visual arts. So what do you guys think? What do these two things have in common, the visual arts and poetry forms?
I was going to give time for Brittany and Tim to respond, but I'll be happy to respond. Yeah, aesthetics is a totally sensory experience. And I think sometimes the reason why you look at a piece of art and you just really enjoy it, and maybe can't explain why you enjoy it, is because there's some sort of balance or rhythm or symmetry, the same things poetry has, that visually you see and makes you enjoy the piece in front of you.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things we talked about this with poetry, that sometimes we think, oh, that's lofty and beyond us. But the very first thing that children know about poetry is they like the way it sounds to their ear. There's pleasure in it. And so we should become like little children as we listen to poetry or as we look at art. So that's good. Were you going to say something, Brittany?
I was thinking the same thing along the lines of delight and pleasure, because both of those things, art, visual art and poetry, appeal to our senses and help us learn to listen and learn to see. learn to attend.
Mhm.
And I was thinking about how they both were imitative of our creator too, as image bearers.
Mm.
That's something that we imitate him by creating those things and by enjoying those things.
Yeah.
And he said creation into being. So the Lord used words, poetry, to make the visual things that we see.
I think too, it's constrained, right? Like we talk about poetry as constrained writing. It has rules that you have to follow. It has a meter or a rhyme scheme or a shape on the page or whatever the restraints are. And visual arts too have some constraints, right? Either it's a sculpture that's made out of marble and you have to, your one material is marble, or maybe it's an oil painting and you use paint and canvas and certain brushes or other utensils to help you form the thing, but it's only the limited world of whatever it is you selected as your medium.
I've had some fun with my students crossing these two things of poetry and art this year. So I'm tutoring Challenge 4, and in the reasoning strand, we were reading through the Old Testament. And so when we got to the chapters about the construction of Solomon's temple, we drew things on the board, which was an exercise I had done a long time ago with you, Lee. But they wanted to draw the pillars and they wanted to draw the bath, and try to represent those oxen that are around the base. And then they did this. I think that was inspiring. So then when we got to the Iliad, we tried to draw Achilles' shield. I say tried to draw because there was a lot going on there and we couldn't quite get it the way we wanted it on the whiteboard, but we made a valiant effort. And then we also drew this giant cup that Nestor uses to serve the wine to the warriors, because they wanted to see what they were reading about in the poetry. And so I have loved those interactions this year.
I even love the word you just used. It said they made a valiant effort, not they did a good job.
Yeah. Yes. And then, of course, we spent some time looking at other people's renditions of those things to see how ours compared. So it was a great exercise. I think it helped us a great deal to make that effort. It helped us understand the words on the page, even though it wasn't perfect artwork.
Well, that's one thing, being able to at least do simple drawings, even if you're not a great artist, is so that like when we go and you read through scriptures, or you're even studying, say, Napoleon's battles, if you can kind of sketch what the words say when you're not familiar with the time or the place, it can help you to understand the actual words and the plot better.
Yeah. And I think as I've gotten to be a more mature adult reader, when I was younger, if I couldn't visualize those things, I would skip over them. And now I really relish stopping and saying, wait a minute, what did that look like? I want to know more. So I'm enjoying that as a new phase of life.
I'm a little surprised by that, Jennifer, with your love of Dickens and the way he goes on and on with all those long descriptions of things.
Those are mostly descriptions of people, though. That's easier for me to visualize for some reason. Jerry Cruncher's hair standing up on end. I don't have to draw that to visualize it for some reason. So, although that would make a fantastic cartoon drawing. Oh, well, as we talk about this book today, we always talk about our 3 pillars in classical conversations. We have classical and Christian and community. And so let's talk for a minute about that pillar of classical. How does Marvelous to Behold? What's it doing in a classical education?
So one thing to remember is that we're starting with it's in chronological order, and so we're back to like the Renaissance time through modern, and for us that's classical because those are enduring artworks. But if you would have had the same kind of a study in the Middle Ages, you probably would have gone back even farther, because a lot of the ones we look at aren't even in existence. So I think what makes these classical is that they've stood the test of time, and that they're beautiful, true, and good. But to remind people that they are still relatively modern, the majority of the art, and that classical does not always mean ancient. That what it really means is, does it preserve, like it just said, true, good, and beautiful ideas? And so I think that's one way that they're classical.
Yeah, we've talked about that being a summary of that would be that they're timeless. Nice. So Brittany, what about,
Yeah.
I may throw you a curveball here, but what about just in the way we are teaching students to look at the art? What about that
Mhm.
pedagogy or that way of teaching is classical?
Well, even with our youngest students, we're teaching them to attend
Mhm.
and really look and see and to encounter beauty. The examples we give them are really beautiful. They, like you said, they're masterpieces, and which we also find in poetry, as you mentioned with Homer. I think the way in which we ask students to look and see, to slow down, and to really attend to a painting, and then ask ourselves a few questions so that we are able to enter into that encounter with beauty and understand something that might even be transcendent,
Mm.
a way of knowing that isn't something scientific, but poetic
Mm.
in nature. So we really come to understand a thing in a different way.
To really know it.
If our listeners want to know, have more discussions on art, the first 10 minutes of all 30 of the Math Map book clubs this past year, we spent 10 minutes discussing how to see art. Because the ideas of balance and symmetry and proportion, straight lines, curved lines, all the colors, those are all mathematical concepts. And so that's another thing that makes it the study of art classical and a good pedagogy, is to ask just students, what do they see in front of them, and how do they, what words do they know that can describe the art?
Yeah, and that's another good connection between our other episodes this month, about poetry and the art, is we talked about last week, the little book, How Does a Poem Mean? So in other words, how does it sound? What metaphors and analogies did the poet use? And that would be true here in art too, as you just described, the brushstrokes and the perspective and the medium itself. How did that limit or enhance what they were trying to say? So.
And I think the other thing is that it's an integrated thing that we do with art, that we don't put art in a box and that it's all alone by itself over there, and we go and take it out and look at it and then put it away, and it's never part of anything else. It has nothing to do with what else we do. I think looking at the art and considering when it was made and where it was made, and how the artist learned to do what they learned, and what they were looking at. Where were they when they made this art? Were they looking at something real in front of them, or was it in their imagination? Uh, and what else was going on in the world at the time that influenced artists at that time? Not losing the fact that the artifacts of art are really an artifact of culture and not just the artist.
Yeah, and as we said earlier, imitating them in foundations gives you a lot of that feel. So if you have to make your tempera paints like Giotto, that does something different for you than if you just look at it. So it's nice to have all of those things woven through the curriculum. Painting, lying down to paint on the underside of a table like Michelangelo is different from just reading about him, or even going to the Sistine Chapel and seeing the ceiling. So it's fun to weave all that together. Well, so I said we have 3 pillars. So our next pillar is the idea of Christian. And this might be trickier for some of us to think about with visual arts, because when we think of Christian, we often would think about truth. And so we might think Jesus is the Son of God. That would be a truth claim. But paintings don't quite work like that. So how do we consider the study of the fine arts to be part of a Christian education? How's that work?
I know for me, I was just at an art museum with another homeschooling mother 2 weeks ago. We spent a couple hours in it, and one of the rooms that we found super interesting was a Arizona Western theme from less than 100 years ago, and how the artists in that room portrayed the women and the clothes that they wore. And it wasn't like from TV. They were hardy, canvas, thick kind of things that would last and probably didn't cost that much to make. And so the women were drawn beautifully and the landscapes were beautiful, though maybe their clothes weren't beautiful. And so that made us know things and think about things that we hadn't before.
That's interesting.
Go ahead, Brittany.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was reading a book recently about I'm listening to a man who's a philosopher talk about this and how it's related to, well, aesthetics, the study of what is beautiful. And he said that sometimes seeing paintings like that, Lee, encountering things that are different from our experience can help us see our neighbor better. Maybe if we could appreciate the beauty of a person without noticing the meagerness of their clothes or something, or the coarseness of their clothes, and see beyond that to how the Lord might see that person in front of us. He was talking about the communal aspect of learning to love what is beautiful and encountering things that are different from our experience in art.
I love that you said that, Brittany, because you know what I was about to say? I was about to say that those moments redefine beauty for us.
Yeah.
And so you said that very eloquently. I had to go through a phase where my family has lived in Oklahoma for multiple generations. And when I was younger, I think I wanted it to look like England because I was kind of obsessed with England. And it doesn't look like England. It's a different kind of a place. And so it's been sort of a lifetime journey to redefine my notions of beauty in this place that I call home. So I've appreciated that. And Western art, Lee, is one of the ways that I've done that, because that's a lot, that sort of rugged pilgrim art has helped me see the beauty of my own place. So,
Yeah, I mean, the Lord gave us his word, which is his clearest communication to us today, right? That we have from him is the Bible, but he also communicates to us in the things that he's made. And I mean, ultimately in Jesus Christ, who walked the earth as an incarnate person, right? So his actions spoke God as much as his words did. And I think art can help us with that. Like, it can show us things about God, not propositional things, but beautiful things that help reattune us to what God has done. I'm reading Perelandra right now by C.S. Lewis, and Ransom in that book goes off to Perelandra and encounters colors that are so vivid and vibrant and overwhelming that when he comes back, he doesn't even have words for them. And I think of that sometimes when I see paintings like some of the Hudson River school paintings, where these painters went out west and came back with these vast canvases of gorgeous light on colors and things in nature that are sort of overwhelmingly big and bold and a little bit too perfect, but not so much too perfect that you can't imagine being there. And in that, it kind of reminds you that this world is not all beautiful and all wonderful, but that God made it that way in the beginning, and that one day he'll restore it.
Yeah, and the beauty is such an important part of worship, and sometimes we're in danger of neglecting that nowadays. Years and years ago, when my children were very small and we were reading our way through a children's Bible, they became just entranced with the descriptions of the tabernacle and the vestments for the high priest. And they wanted to look up every jewel in the breastplate and every color that was in the curtains and on and on. And I remember thinking very succinctly, in fact, I told this to one of my friends, so God didn't just say, tan some goat hides and throw them over some sticks and worship me there. There was an incredible amount of artistry and detail that was involved in the worship, and that's a good reminder for us as we look toward the visual arts too. So,
well, and then you also really asked what makes it Christian, and part of our curriculum is that art always is reflecting something, and it's reflecting something in the created world. And so you couldn't have art if there wasn't a God who had created the world for us. So it's inherently Christian. Even things that are bent or broken are still using Christian elements.
Mhm.
in order to make them.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because we certainly read non-Christian authors, and we believe that there's truth that can be told there if they
Mhm.
tell a true story, then it is beautiful and worthy of our attention. So that's good. Well, let's talk for a minute about the book's title. So it has a more poetic title than some than some curricula pieces, perhaps. So it's called Marvelous to Behold. What in the world does this mean for us as we study it?
Jennifer, you might be able to add to this. Why we settled on that name, I quite frankly can't remember, but when I was researching again the words marvelous to behold, I hadn't realized that in the King James Bible, the word behold was used 1,298 times.
Wow.
And then the Latin for marvelous actually means more along the lines of awesome or astonishing. So the
Mhm.
title itself is interesting.
Yeah, I remember we thought a lot about the idea of beholding, because we wanted to say to students, look at it. As Brittany so eloquently described earlier, attend to the thing in front of you and see all of that is there to see, and stop trying to skip ahead beyond that. Just first look and behold what is in front of you. And that's so important, whether we're doing a math problem, right? We have to behold what is in front of us in order to get to the beauty of it. If we're reading any kind of text, we have to behold what is there in front of us before we see the beauty. And so I think we were focused a lot on that idea of looking and truly attending, and then you get to marvel at after that. So
Yeah, I think the way that the word behold is used a lot in the scriptures is in an imperative, right? It's
Mhm.
a commandment or an instruction to behold.
Mhm.
And we occasionally still hear it. It's sort of antiquated today, right? We don't hear it all that often in common usage, but when we do, it's usually to refer to something that is impressive or right, or wonderful. So we would point at uh the unveiling of a new statue and say, behold, in a way that we wouldn't just say, hey, look at that. So it has today a sense of formality about it, but it attaches itself to things that are worthy of our beholding.
Mhm.
that's good.
When I think the word behold, just the word itself, it sounds like, look, attend, but that part that says hold means for some time and well.
Mhm.
And one of the things the commentator was saying is that now that the New King James version and then the other newer modern versions have it far less than that, they have it less than 600 times. And I thought, well, no wonder no one can be still and pay attention. We're not reminded all the time like we were previously.
Yeah, I won't tangent too far, but I do think what you said is important, that that behold means something different from look. Just like a comparison that we did in community yesterday was, what's the difference between happy and blessed? Because we read Psalm 1, blessed is the man who, and the new version translated it as happy is the man. Well, those mean two different things. So we spent a lot of time thinking about that. So it's good to reclaim some of those older words. Well, Brittany, we'll let you have the last word on the title before we take our commercial break.
Marvelous to behold. I was thinking about the marvels that Moses was commanded to create, or to have created, in order to build the temple that you were talking about earlier. I was thinking about I remember reading that with my kids too, and coming upon all those instructions, and I was imagining them in the desert, surrounded by not a lot except what they were carrying with them. And what a relief it was to me personally, trying to put myself in Moses' shoes, that the Lord said that he provided an artist that he filled with the spirit of, it says, the spirit of God and wisdom and understanding and knowledge of all manner of workmanship, to devise cunning works. And what a relief that was to me, that God had already prepared this artist who must have been good at beholding and had levels of craftsmanship, artistry that then he could help make those things happen. And when we flip through the pages of this book, I would say that the artworks included are indeed marvelous to behold. They are cunning works. They do reward us for our attention if we'll just sit still and look and see.
Nice. That's good. All right. Well, Lee, you want to take us to our commercial break?
I want to thank our sponsor, classicalconversationsbooks.com, where all the books discussed can be purchased. And we have the entire 2023 Words That Was Spoken calendar at leebortons.com with links to this Classical Conversations book site. And I thought I should just say a little promotional, because the academic year has been going on for about 6-8 weeks now. And people might be looking for Christmas presents. You can go to CC Books and get some great literature. Grandparents, maybe ask them for a gift card for Christmas to help pay for second semester books. And then we have some sponsors on there right now. We're helping Miracle in East Texas, a movie that's in theaters in the next weekend that was put together by the Sorbos, as well as some fairly well-known actors. And so there's always all kinds of interesting going on at classicalconversationsbooks.com. I want to encourage you to visit it. And next week, we're going to begin our new month's focus on the ancients. And we're going to look at the book called Theogony by Hesiod. And we have that book available on this site, as well as the study guide. Oh, Jennifer, what's the name of it? I just forgot on my head.
Heroes of the City of Maine.
Heroes of the City of Maine.
Yeah.
So there's 2 books that might help you with the Theogony by Hesiod if you're not familiar with ancient literature. Hey, so
Yeah.
Jennifer, good.
Oh, yeah, I'll get us started. But I did want to say, I've had a couple of grandparents reach out to me and say, my grandkids don't read the same kinds of things I read. And so I have pointed them to our Challenge A and B books on our bookstore as good sources of gifts for their grandkids if they want to pass down that tradition of lovely books. Speaking of things that are marvelous to behold, those are really good books to give your younger kiddos. So, well, good. So we're going to go now and look at the book itself. And then I think Tim's going to have us also look at some artwork. So we would be remiss if we just discussed art and didn't actually look at some. So Tim, do you want to read us our first quote about this modernist idea that beauty is subjective?
Sure, I'm happy to. Also, just wanted to note that our family has a tradition of giving each of our kids a book at Christmas time every Christmas. So I think that's a wonderful thing that they've come to expect and look forward to. So on page 6 in the introduction of Marvelous to Behold, the introduction says this: beware the lure of pure subjectivity as you ponder these questions. It is easy to say art is whatever I think art is, what I agree with and enjoy. Beauty is whatever I think is beautiful. No one has authority to tell me how I ought to think about art. If we take these answers as true, it reduces beauty and love of art to a release of serotonin and epinephrine in the back of your brain. Beauty becomes a purely private experience that can never be shared with anyone. And that is not how we think about beauty, how we talk about beauty, or what we ardently longed for beauty to be.
My first impression is that kind of hits our third pillar of community, because it is this communal experience of beholding beauty together and being able to say together, yes, that thing is beautiful. It's not just about what I think. It's about it telling a true story, like we said.
Yeah, I think it has to do too with the fact that we should be thinking about beauty in the same way we think about truth and goodness, that they're intrinsic in the thing. They're not just something that we think about them, right? A good deed is good because it's good, not just because we think it's good. And a true statement is true whether we know it's true or not. It just is. And a beautiful painting is beautiful because it's beautiful. And hopefully we've aligned ourselves to that beauty, and our eyes and our souls recognize it as beautiful. I think that's one of the great things about this book and about a good classical Christian curriculum is that it should be sort of tuning our affections so that we know beauty when we see it.
It's not just knowing it when we see it, Tim, don't you think it's also being able to have some words to explain why?
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
being equipped to discuss it, to and to get beyond just the basics of it, though that's a good place to start. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, we don't have a good vocabulary for beauty. We do for truth, and we do for the most part for goodness, but beauty is much harder for us to talk about. So practicing that is a really helpful thing for all of us.
I was thinking about how that lack, it's almost the opposite of that lack, is how when people don't have words and things get ugly and they go to war or rage or violence because they don't have the right words to describe what they need to do and to communicate civilly. That the opposite of that is to see something that's so wonderful that you don't have any words for it. Now, that doesn't mean there's not a benefit to going, like you were saying with Paralandra, he comes home and doesn't have words for how amazing the color were. But to always be in that state would make it so it's difficult to be in community.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that ties back to this idea of art and worship. We sometimes struggle the older we get to we need to continually build our vocabulary, not so that we can seem smarter than everyone else in the world, but so that we can really articulate who God is and what he's done for us. And that as we grow in the knowledge of him, our vocabulary must grow to express that knowledge. And so that's true in anything. It's true with our art too, that we need that growing vocabulary to express what we're seeing and knowing.
That statement about beauty becoming a purely private experience reminds me of Wendell Berry's critique of Percy Shelley's poetry, right? He would argue that a lot of Shelley's poems are of that sort. They become a purely private experience that he's written down that other people are reading but can't comprehend because it's so internal and so much not something that's communicable that it loses its real meaning. It becomes not a real poem, it becomes words on a page to other people.
Mhm. I was thinking about how beauty is an attribute of God, like truth and goodness is, and because we're made in his image, we have a need for that beauty. It's something that delights us, as we talked about, refreshes our spirit. And I think we sometimes can be really pragmatic and think that it doesn't matter. You can see this in the design of architecture in our world or churches even. And yet in the scriptures, it talks about how God instructed the robes of the priests to be a certain way, and the why for beauty and for glory was the Lord's reason. And I don't know if we make decisions about the way our homes are to the best, given our resources, and our churches are given those resources, and even public buildings are designed in a way that either impoverishes our imagination and our community spirit, or it feeds it.
Yeah. Yes, and that was definitely something that was better understood in prior eras, right? If you go to a government building in Italy and you see the allegory of good and bad government painted as a mural on the wall, that says something to you about what's happening in that building and how your culture views government. And they felt the need to put it in the form of a mural in the building so that everyone could see and acknowledge that.
The thing is, I get concerned because people don't always like who are classically minded don't always like modern art, and I like it a whole lot. I don't like. I don't know. I guess I like it proportionally to probably classical art too, because there's classical pieces I don't particularly enjoy. But I love clean lines, and I love I'm like OCD about balance, and like even when I'm driving down the highway and I'm stopped at the traffic lights, it irritates me if there's one traffic light that has 3 bulbs and the other one has 4. Like, I just love balance so much. And then sometimes you'll have like a super busy wall or a busy room, and you want something that's just a splash of color. You don't want a lot of detail in the art. And so being able to see not the piece itself, but what does it do to enhance everything around it too?
Yeah. So thinking about
That's good.
circumstance.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, let's take some time to learn how to read a painting, since we've been talking all around it. For those of you who don't own Marvelous to Behold, there are flaps that we intentionally put so that they could be folded over every painting in the book, so that they would help you to behold what is in front of you. So they have questions about color and line, and as you mentioned, Lee, symmetry. So let's take a painting and discuss it amongst ourselves. Are you the one showing it, Tim? Yes. Okay. Good. Nice. All right. So this is Impression Sunrise by Monet. And let's just start off with some of the questions that are on the flap. So what is the subject of this painting?
I see a
Have to get where I can
sunset on
see.
water.
Okay, good. A sunset on the water. Nice.
Why'd you say sunset instead of sunrise?
I don't know. After I said that, I was like, but maybe it's rising.
Hard
Yeah,
to
no, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure, because I actually did see a sunrise the other morning that had these same streaks of bright orange.
So that might lead us to our first question. Did Monet himself choose the title Impression Sunrise or not? I don't know without refreshing my memory.
Yeah, the title should tell us, but I wouldn't have, if I didn't know the title, I wouldn't know.
Yeah. So what kinds of colors are here in his painting?
They're a little bit muted, they're a little bit muddy, and that's why the sunrise stands out so much.
There's blues and oranges.
And this, I think it's black. It's hard to tell on the screen. It might be a super dark gray to give you the boats.
But even though they're pretty, because like what I said, muted is they're not primary colors. They're not neon colors. They're not bold colors. And sometimes saying what something isn't helps a young person figure out what it is in the right words.
Yeah, and it helps you see the one color that really is that bright neon orange there. What else helps the sun itself to stick out besides its color?
It's placement, perhaps, and its reflection.
Yeah, your eye is really
Slightly
drawn
off.
to that. Yeah. Go ahead, Brittany. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. It's just slightly off center.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can see the trailing reflection across the movement of the water, I'm guessing. He must have painted that quickly.
I think the perfect or nearly perfect roundness of the sun, where everything else is sort of an indistinct shape.
Yeah.
It's very clear.
So he used geometry in a specific way.
Painting round circles is hard.
Yes.
To get it perfectly round.
Yes. I can say that from experience.
Drawing it on a whiteboard is also really hard for physics.
Yes, my students make fun of me for that. In fact, they bought me a dry erase marker compass to try to help me. Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
I always marvel at the way that great artists can capture light in painting, right? Because the paint isn't emitting any light at all, but you see it and your eyes recognize light on the canvas.
Like all the reflections of those light whites that are through the water is like the sideways sunshine.
Yeah, those glints, right? Those glints of light refracting off the water.
And it's also in the clouds, which aren't really firmly
Mhm.
clouds, but you know they're there because of the way he's muted the orange color in the sky.
Well, and then by putting the shadows all on the proper sides of the boats and the cranes sticking up in the trees, that helps you just without even noticing, it helps you to see it the way he wants you to see it because he just thought of everything.
Yes. Yeah, so that's a good point. How does he get it seems like it's very simple, but yet there is an aspect of depth here. So how does he do that?
Things in the
Yes.
foreground are more distinct. Sorry, Tim.
That's fine. There's even though everything is a little foggy or unclear, there is a horizon line. You can see where
Mhm.
the sky and the earth are separate.
Yes, I was noticing that too. You don't have to guess where the water is versus the sky. It's pretty clear, even though it's muted back there. That's very skillful. So
And
what about, oh, go ahead.
And the gradient of colors too, where you go from
Mhm.
these lighter colors at the top and the bottom of the painting toward the center, it gets darker, right? So your
Mhm.
eye is drawn into the
Mm.
middle as far away.
See, that's why I think it's a sunrise, just without knowing the title, because the you're drawn to the lightness above
Mm.
compared to
Yes.
the dark below. Like you know the sun's doing this, not
Mhm.
doing this.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Makes
that's
sense.
right.
That's good. So what about his brush strokes? How would you describe these?
It's like he was dancing with it. Boom, 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 boom.
Mhm.
I don't know a word.
Yeah, especially the trail of the orange to the water. He's got a lot of paint on the brush
Mhm.
through that section.
Mhm.
A lot.
But he's got that same technique on the water on the left and the dark
Mhm.
water pieces that are towards us.
Mhm.
And a little bit to the right by what I believe these are some sort of industrial area. Are these cranes or something back behind
Sort
there?
of looks like it, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah, and again, just as the colors change, the brushstrokes change too as you recede into that misty
Mhm.
background. Whereas in the top of the sky and down in the foreground of the water, you have the sort of choppy brushstrokes. The farther back you get, the more smooth things are.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, as he's creating that distance, he smooths it out. Well, what about, we talked at the beginning about symmetry and asymmetry. How would you describe this one? Is this a symmetrical painting or not?
I was noticing how the water is reflecting the sky pretty well,
Mhm.
like a mirror image, even at the most or the closest to us, how it reflects the sky at the top in the same colors. I was trying to figure out which part he painted first.
Mm. So it feels symmetrical to you, top and bottom,
Top and
with the
bottom,
sky and the water.
but not
it-
exactly left to right to me.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's left to right if you look at there being two lines, not one line. So you've got the river
Mhm.
going right down the middle and the sunshine going
Mm.
down to the right of it. And there's just as
Mhm.
much blue space. So if that was the middle altogether, then it's centered. But the
Mhm.
other thing is the eye likes for there to be focal points at
Mhm.
the 2/3 point. And that's a different kind of symmetry. So he did the 2/3,
Mhm.
1/3 with the
Mhm.
orange.
And there's also a top left to bottom right line that kind of runs through, right? You see that
Mhm.
high left and the boats both there on that same line coming across the painting down to the right side. And then up to the right of that, the only thing there really is to look at is the sun. Everything else is so indistinct you can't really tell what it is. So you have an
Mhm.
asymmetry across that line.
Yeah. Well, we're
But
almost Oh, go ahead.
Well, and the fact that you said asymmetry, I totally agree with you, but the reason you know it's asymmetrical is because there's so much good symmetry that you have it to compare to.
Mhm.
Yeah. Defining things by what they are not sometimes is useful, as we pointed out. So we probably have
Mhm.
time for maybe one more question and maybe a final thought or two, but do you think that this painting appears natural or unnatural? This was a big talking point during the time that these works were first exhibited, because the original critics said it was absolutely unnatural because it was not realistic style. And it was very jarring to the first critics who saw it. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, compared to some art that preceded this, they would say, well, this is like a sketch, right? Where it's waiting to be completed or filled in or smoothed out and the details added. But I think you would argue that he's trying to capture a mood or a feeling more than he is trying to capture the thing itself. And that
I
tends
think
to,
we.
it could be natural. You could argue that it is natural, but it's clearly unnatural in other ways too.
So how does the new AI generated art change the meaning of natural and unnatural?
Whoa, that sounds like a whole episode, Lee. I don't know. Everything in me wants to say it's unnatural, but that's probably not quite fair.
Well, because the critics were saying this wasn't natural, because really, if you use that word, did they really mean realistic?
I think they meant
Or did they
realistic.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, and then when we had photographs come in, did they really mean it was more of a photographic look versus an artistic look? Like the words have changed themselves, and then we have more words as we have more technologies. And sometimes we just still use the old words. Maybe some of the new ones might be better.
Yes, and we've also and also critics talk about whether or not photographs portray the truth. They don't always. So we tend to immediately hear it's a photographic image and think, oh, well, it must have every detail. It must be true then. But those are all good discussions to have with our students. Well, sadly, we are out of time, but thank you so much for letting us actually look at a painting on this episode and do something different. I appreciated that exercise. So do you have any closing thoughts that you wanted to say, Lee?
No, it's one of my most favorite hours of the week is to talk about literature and words and beauty and truth with you guys. So thanks for being here, and I'll see you next week.
All right. See you guys next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.